I'd like to express my gratitude for having been invited to participate in this, the 4th Pan-African Conference, which takes place this weekend. It's a singular honor. The conference also coincides, of course, with the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the Organization of African Unity, now the AU. So it's a good time to take stock of the road that we have walked, but most importantly, it's a good time to map out a plan for the road that lies ahead. And for this reason, the Steve Biko Foundation earlier this month invited the chair of the AU, Dr. Nkosazana Zuma, to give the 14th Steve Biko Memorial Lecture in Cape Town on the topic of Pan-Africanism and the African Development Agenda. A paper which I know will be of interest to this group is available online on our website, www.sbf.org.za. The honor is all the more magnified in that the organizers of this conference have chosen to dedicate these reflections to the memory of a number of heroes and sheroes of our struggles against colonialism and oppression in Southern Africa, in the hope of drawing useful lessons for the continuing struggles to improve the fortunes of Africa and her children on and off the continent. And the first of these is, of course, a tribute to the victims of the Namibian genocide. In this regard, the conference's first challenge is to reflect on this genocide, but most importantly, on the heroism of the Herero, the Nama, the Damara, and the San people of Namibia, who were massacred in then German Southwest Africa, now Namibia, during the Herero Wars, which took place between the years 1904 and 1907. These wars resulted in the death of more than 100,000 people in what was subsequently recorded as the earliest attempt at genocide in the 20th century. My brief does not allow me to dwell much on this subject, as that is the task of the session that is to follow, which session will hopefully reflect more fully on the episode and the facts surrounding that particular episode of our history. It's my hope that the session will deal with the issues of acknowledgement of responsibility, deal with the issues of reparation and of justice, as well as other matters that should continue to be probed as part of the attempt to restore the dignity of the peoples of Namibia. I must declare that I have a special interest in Namibia, in that my young brother, 2 years ago, married a young Namibian woman. So these are our in-laws. I was leading the negotiations with the other family, and we had to plead Dr. Stofile for 3 days in Nama, and the term is Kam Sim. Please, please, please allow us to marry your daughter. And ultimately, they have become blessed with a young girl, Zenande Kaikos Biko. Zenande, of course, means may you multiply. So to the people of Namibia, to whom history has dealt a blow in an attempt to obliterate them, may they multiply. The second commemoration is of Miriam Makeba, a great daughter of Africa. Soft in speech, yet powerful in song and in action. Miriam Makeba rose from humble beginnings from her birth town of Johannesburg to become one of the most celebrated musicians of the world. After being rejected by apartheid, and this happened when she established in 1960, she was on tour, that her passport had been cancelled. Miriam went on to be embraced as a citizen by many countries around the world, including Guinea, Belgium, and Ghana. She performed with the likes of Harry Belafonte, Dizzy Gillespie, Nina Simone, Hugh Masekela, and many other distinguished musicians. Though founded in music, her passion extended well beyond the world of music, for she became an ambassador of the continent, an activist for human rights, and a symbol of triumph over adversity. And perhaps one of the most memorable moments of her life was when she ably represented the case against apartheid at the United Nations in 1963. I once more salute the organizers of this conference for invoking the spirit of Makeba, knowing as we do as Africans that her life's work, music, is the most common language spoken amongst Africans. Song is the definitive feature of the African gathering, whether such gathering is in celebration or in sorrow. Makeba has been inspired by these gatherings and in turn grew to inspire these gatherings. Her voice touched us enough as to bestow upon her the fitting title of Mama Africa. Sadly, we lost Mama Africa in November 2008. Like the citizen of the world that she truly was, she had returned to the country of her birth, following democracy in South Africa, only to die many miles from home, on tour, doing what she loved most. For this gathering, which seeks to mobilize energy in furtherance of the Pan-African dream, Makeba's life reminds us of the important role of the artist. Many scholars have argued that the artists are a mirror of society. For this school of thought, the artist transcends her studio, becoming studious and thus reflective of the circumstances around that studio. In this respect, Makeba is in the company of the likes of Bob Marley and many others who helped to bring many of our societal ills into sharp focus. If you cannot be moved out of complacency, if you cannot be moved into action by Marley's message in redemption songs, you can't ever be moved. Like that of Marley, may Makeba's soul rest in peace, and may she forever continue to inspire us through her timeless tunes. The third commemoration is in respect of the contribution of Bantu Stephen Biko. Bantu Stephen Biko, and I must say that it's not ironic that we had to watch that video twice, for his life provided us a second take on our struggle. He was born in 1946, 2 years before the National Party won the general elections of 1948, following which the party adopted apartheid as its official policy. This was not, of course, the beginning of oppression in South Africa, but rather a consolidation of over 300 years of colonial rule with a racial and a class bias. Yesterday, one of the speakers, Dr. Michael Eze, gave us an insightful exposition on the architecture of racism. He argued, among others, that a critical element of racism is the systematic erosion of a people's history in order to be able to force them into nothingness and thus into subservience. He referenced the leader role of the scholar, citing numerous examples of how supposedly distinguished scholars have supported dubious theories which have been used to uphold and support oppressive regimes. One such scholar was Hendrik Verwoerd, who became the Minister of Native Affairs, governing over black people in 1950, 4 years after the birth of Steve Biko. A few years earlier, from 1925 onward, he had come to Germany to study at the universities of Hamburg, Berlin, and Leipzig. It's believed that the rise of nationalism in Germany, which took place a few years later, and which saw the birth of Nazi Germany in 1933, provided him with a useful template for his role as a Minister of Native Affairs later on in his life. Giving the first Steve Biko Memorial Lecture, Professor Njabulo Ndebele describes the devastation of this template, and in particular, the contradictions that characterized it, given that it was based on a claim to superiority in morality and in intellect. And he summarizes it as follows. It strikes me now just how terribly unreflective Afrikanerdom became once apartheid had wormed its way into the center of its moral fiber. When apartheid culture became both a private and a public condition, defining a cultural sensitivity, Afrikanerdom significantly lost much of its sense of irony. In this situation, the combination of political, economic, and military power, validated by religious precept, yielded a universal sense of entitlement. Afrikanerdom was entitled to land, air, water, beast, and each and every black body. At this point, the treatment of black people ceases to be a moral concern. Speaking harshly to a black person, stamping with both feet on his head or chest, roasting a black body over the flames to obliterate evidence of murder, not because murder was wrong, but because it was an irritating embarrassment. Dismembering the black body by tying wire around its ankles and dragging it behind a car, whipping black school children, handing an illiterate black mother presenting her ailing infant for treatment a death certificate in order that the white doctor should not be disturbed in the night when the infant dies. These are things one who is white in South Africa can do from time to time to black bodies in the total scheme of things. End quote. It is this lived reality that gave rise to people like Steve Biko. Until around 1963, Steve Biko had shown little interest in politics. In 1963, we heard from the interview by a mother that he was arrested together with his brother Kaya and numerous other students at the Lovedale College in the Eastern Cape. And they stood accused of furthering the objectives of the Pan-African Congress, which had led the anti-pass campaign in March 1960, a campaign to destroy the passbook, the very instrument that was used by Verwoerd to restrict the movement of black people. The PAC had by then established a military wing called Borgo, a wing of which the students were accused of being agents. Now, during his interrogation, it was soon established that he knew very little. He was only 16, and he was subsequently released and given a letter to pass on to his principal. It was a letter of his dismissal from the school, and he subsequently was blacklisted from all public schools. Steve Biko later defines this as a turning moment in his life. And I think what incensed him the most was the fact that the school did not respond to the arrest of students in accordance with its teachings. It was a liberal school, a Christian missionary school, that professed to stand for the values, for certain values, including, of course, the right to dignity of black South Africans. It silently declared the innocence of those that had been arrested and imprisoned, but refused to take a definitive action against the state in defense of the students. And for Biko, this impotence of the liberal doctrine, its failure to translate into meaningful action, was something that became a critical aspect of his political orientation. A few years later, he, having gone through a different college and ultimately landed up at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, the black section, as a medical student, he arrived there and served as a member of the Student Representative Council. Among other things, he became involved in the National Union of South African Students, a multiracial students organization. And here again, he encountered a challenge and a frustration he had experienced in yesteryear. NUSAS, he argued, was dangerous for two reasons. It gave the black students a false comfort that their struggle was being advanced. And as a result, many disengaged from the struggle. If still engaged, they acted in deference to their white liberal colleagues within the student movement because of the inherent power dynamics. Of course, NUSAS was a microcosm of a racialized apartheid society. Yet far from being a solution, the danger with NUSAS was its propensity for comfortable politics. It sought to frame a response to apartheid within the rules of apartheid. And there are many examples that I can cite that I will not get into today, but one of them was a student conference that was held in Grahamstown. And the big debate was where the students were going to be accommodated. And in South Africa at the time, there existed the 72-hour rule, which prohibited people from being in an area designated for others for more than 72 hours without going for clearance with the local authorities. So the choice was whether or not the students were going to be accommodated in the township, the black section, or otherwise on the town side, the white section. But in any way, the black students were arguing that there needed to be a statement made by the conference. And of course, the leadership within NUSAS chose the safer of the options, that the black students would be accommodated in the black section of town and the white students in the white section of town. And this, I think, was the final nail in the coffin of NUSAS. The conference led to the rise of a debate called the best able debate. Who are the people best able to determine the tempo and the texture of the struggle? And Biko and his colleagues walked out to establish the South African Students Organization. Now, what was the proposition of SASO? First, it pointed the finger at the oppressors and offered a harsh review of the conditions of oppression under which black people lived. Second, and most importantly, it pointed a firm finger at self, challenging black South Africans to develop a positive sense of self. And as Biko argued, the most dangerous weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Biko's thesis provided for black South Africa a new political, cultural, and economic vocabulary. And at the center of this vocabulary was the teaching that black South Africans were ultimately responsible for their freedom and needed to rise to the challenge of liberating themselves. So, I guess distinct from capitalism, which taught us that free markets or free market forces are the tool for change, and distinct from socialism, which taught us that controlling the economy, at least in part, is the answer. Black consciousness taught us that the soul was the ultimate site of the African struggle. I want to suggest that the biggest challenge facing Pan-Africanism is not that Africans are now not in control of the minds and the economies. It is that there still exists a void in their souls that leads them to lead and direct these economies in a manner that has little to do with the interests of Africa. The vocabulary of black consciousness had many similarities with other struggles around the world, and most notably, it was informed by the winds of change that were happening on the continent. And I think there's a reflection here of what was happening in Mozambique, but other countries on the continent, and elsewhere what was happening within the Black Power movement and other such struggles. But Biko himself argues that this pollination was not causal to the emergence of black consciousness in South Africa. It arose not because, to use his words, we were looking for voices to articulate our struggle. Our struggle is a product of the lived realities of our people. We were looking for voices that echoed our response to the struggle. One of the voices was Brazilian Paulo Freire, who wrote quite articulately about what black consciousness was trying to do. Freire's thesis of empowering the self challenges us to look at the possibility of three tools. The first is we can choose to exist at the level of what he calls primitive consciousness. And primitive consciousness does not have a sense of yesterday and a tomorrow. We are just beings. Beings not distinct from, I guess, dogs and cats and others. He then talks of what he calls mass consciousness, the kind of consciousness that is prevalent among young people who will want to wear a certain pair of jeans or shoes because others have it. So you step out of your house and the wind carries you in whatever direction it is headed. There is no purpose. But Freire, like the black consciousness movement, challenged people to live at the level of what Freire calls critical consciousness. And this is a kind of existence that acknowledges that there is a yesterday and a tomorrow. And the link between those two is the self. It incited people to become agents of change. The success of the movement in re-energizing the struggle brought with it some backlash. And one of the criticisms was, in fact, that it was seen as a movement that was anti-white. In reality, though, the proposition was much more complex than tends to be appreciated by those that criticize it this way. First, Sasso argued that it was more pragmatic to lose ground and build a robust, effective resistance movement than to appear to gain ground on a superficial reactionary trajectory. The robustness of the struggle would not, however, be constructed by eliminating whites from the struggle. Steve Biko says it himself. Rather, SASO and the Black Consciousness, Black People's Convention advocated a process that would eliminate from South African society the complexes of superiority and of inferiority, and sowing in their place the ingredients of mutual respect. Even blacks, for that matter, were not simply regarded as desirable for the simple reason that they were black. They had to undergo a fundamental shift in their outlook. And the term non-white was still reserved for those who were associated, who were embracing of the status quo. And we saw a bit of that in reference to Gacha Buteles in Matanzima and others. They had to reject the status quo, develop a positive sense of self, and then link that to the emancipation program as agents of change for them to be accepted into the struggle. The movement further acknowledged that there was an important role to be played by white South Africans. And the question was not to reject, but to challenge the liberal establishment, to revisit its role in the struggle. SASO argued that while liberalism was important for the struggle, it was not sufficient to bring about change. And to use his words, we do not want white liberals, we want white radicals. People who are prepared to challenge the status quo at all costs. We have in this room Dr. Dennis Goldberg, who is one of the finest examples of a South African who associated himself with the struggle in ways envisaged by SASO. He was, of course, active earlier than the existence of SASO. There are others that are on the same list, people like Bear Snowdeer, Ronnie Castles, and many, many more, who had the option to escape aligning themselves with the marginalized, but chose to immerse themselves in the struggle at a huge personal sacrifice and in defense of their beliefs. Now, I have a sense of what that means as a child, and so I have a sense of what it means for the children of Dr. Goldberg and others who made that choice. In an interview elsewhere, Dr. Goldberg shares the meaning of this commitment in the following words, and I don't know if they quoted you well here, Doc. If you were black and joined the struggle, he says, you had support. If you were white and you joined the struggle, you faced rejection from your people, the highest form of sacrifice. Although Biko is largely respected and acknowledged as the father of black consciousness, and indeed helped black South Africans sharpen their ideology, there is a sense in which perhaps he is a father of national consciousness, given the extent to which he challenged even white South Africa to re-examine the duality of the liberal discourse. Ultimately, his call is directed at inciting agency at the level of the citizen. It challenges those who are marginalized to refrain from being spectators in a game in which they should be players, to use his words. And those who are privileged to commit themselves fully to the struggles of the marginalized, otherwise to desist from propagating false hope and waging pseudo-struggles. My final remarks about what this means to a present-day South Africa. There is an undeniable air of political freedom in South Africa. People talk in ways we couldn't in the past. They write and express opinion in ways we never imagined would be possible. They do so, perhaps, to the extent that it has become uncomfortable to some, particularly those in the ruling party. So this is a contested space in South Africa, and there are all sorts of legislations that have to do with how this space is managed. But South Africa is undeniably free politically. South Africa, however, has failed to free the majority of its people economically. It's rated as the most unequal society in the world, with a Gini coefficient, which measures the gap between the richest rich and the poorest poor, of 0.63. We used to compete with Brazil. We are now the world leaders. According to the United Nations Development Report of 2013, South Africa occupies position 121 on the Human Development Index, composed of a ranking of 186 countries around the world. The HDI provides a composite measure of 3 dimensions of human development: living a long, healthy style, being educated, and having a decent standard of living. Of the estimated 54 million South Africans, more than a third are victims of unemployment and poverty. Although the emerging upper class is becoming integrated, there still remains a concentration of poverty within the black communities. The lower stratum of our communities, which constitute about 40% of the population, and 1/10 of the national income. The higher stratum, the top 12%, and 45% of the national income. Now, this obviously has got a history in terms of the policies of the past. But notwithstanding nearly 2 decades of a democratic dispensation, inequality remains an enduring feature of the new South Africa, as transformation policies continue to fail to embrace those on the fringes of our economy. So as a result, there is a growing impatience amongst the marginalized. And this is evident in the latest series of strikes taking place in South Africa, which are characterized by unprecedented wage demands, leading many analysts to conclude that we have indeed come to the end of the honeymoon period. I want to suggest that the new black is the economically marginalized underclass. The vast number of South Africans who continue to live on the periphery of our democracy. And I think that South African citizens are not perfectly aligned in response to this particular challenge, the challenge of assaulting poverty in our country. This year was a huge debate around the land question in South Africa. And as you will know, we have chosen an approach that differs from Zimbabwe based on willing buyer, willing seller, and just compensation. And even that has become a very divisive issue in South Africa. The country is not aligned in respect of the need to sustain corrective actions, black economic empowerment and such other programs. And if you listen in on radio, you will hear how polarized people are, and mainly along the lines of color. And perhaps, Dr. Goldberg, one of the most unfortunate consequences of the Truth Commission was that even before we had had a chance to think and talk about what it meant, we were bestowed by the world as a rainbow nation. Further, this phase will require a commitment and a contribution from all South Africans. And it may require the privileged class, including the new black elite, to sacrifice some of their privileges. I started by saying Africans take their time to talk about wellness, because ultimately wellness for the African is a process that starts outside in. It is the wellness of the fields, the wellness of the neighbor, the new birth, the new wedding that ultimately becomes what defines whether or not we are well. And until the majority of South Africans on the periphery are well, we are not well as a South African. I would like to end by a quote, or with a quote, about Biko's dream for a South Africa and an Africa, which says, "We have set out on a quest for a true humanity. And somewhere in the distant horizon, we can see the glittering prize. Let us march forth for drawing strength. Let us march forth, drawing strength from our common plight. In time, we shall be in a position to bestow upon South Africa the greatest gift possible, a more humane face." Thank you.